Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us here today. I understand Sir Edward Elgar played the Enigma variations, according to Andy, exactly here. Is that right? Yeah. Exactly at this spot. So we've got the music already, okay? Big thank you, all of you, for coming this afternoon. And thank you for everyone on the platform, and a special thank you to my good friend Andy MacDonald coming along this afternoon. We worked very well together in Parliament, having arguments with Chris Grayling on the Justice Committee, and the best answer I ever got out of Chris Grayling was I gave him a long argument about why everyone should have access to legal aid, so there was equality of access to justice, and he just looked at me blankly and said, Mr. Corbyn, I ideologically disagree with you. So I said, what kind of answer is that? And he said, well, it's no, actually. So we knew exactly what we were dealing with those people, and we know exactly what we're dealing with them. And we've also got some issues we have to deal with ourselves as a party. First of all, I want to say thank you to all those people that have done so much to help this leadership campaign that we're undertaking at the moment. All the unions that supported us, Unite, Unison, TSSA, ASLEF, RMT, Fire Brigades Union, Bakers Union, Communication Workers Union, Socialist Education Association and Prison Officers Association have all given a lot of help and a lot of support to this campaign. And 150 constituency parties nominated, as well as 36 MPs. I realise some of those members of Parliament were apparently quite reluctant to make a nomination. At least that's what it says in the papers, so it must be true. I recognise that some of them did it out of a sense of wanting an open and democratic choice for all party members, and I thank them for that, because it's a decent and honourable thing to do. But I also thank all those party members and supporters all over the country who wanted to make sure there was a full leadership election and a full leadership debate, and got onto social media to encourage those nominees to actually put their signatures on the paper. So thank you to all of them. It means that we do have this very strong and very serious debate about the direction our party has got to go in. I would also say that the atmosphere surrounding this is quite incredible. I'm not very good at keeping exact count of all the events we've been to, but I think this is somewhere around the 75th event that I've done in various ways, either through hustings events or lots of other meetings. All of them are large, like this one is here this afternoon. Most of them are overflowing onto the street, and most of them are enjoyable. They're all very enjoyable, actually. And why? Because there's a sense of optimism, there's a sense of openness, and there's a sense of real debate going on. I would also say that I am passionate about my beliefs and my politics, as we all are. I'm passionate that we live in a decent and respectful society, and therefore I absolutely will not, never have, indulge in personal abuse, name-calling, or replies of those sorts. So, I'm really totally unperturbed what is said about me. I'm totally unperturbed about what is said about our campaign. If people do not agree with some of the proposals, and they're all proposals that are coming from our team, fine. Tell us where you don't agree. Make an alternative suggestion. But above all, engage in the debate. Engage in serious, real politics. And the other suggestion, which I'll come back to a little later, I'm not going to speak for long, but a little bit later, is one about democracy and participation within our society. I think the political class has got a long, long way away from its democratic base, and policy making has certainly taken a rocket drive well away from the grassroots where it ought to belong. And so I don't see this election for the leader and deputy leader of the party as electing some all-seeing, all-knowing, super-powerful, multi-intelligent, multitasking human being that will write every policy forevermore and hand it down on a tablet which the rest of the party will enjoy and accept and sing praises and hosannas forevermore to that individual. I think we can do things a bit differently. Cannot we end this idea of policy making around dining tables of the elite in our society and go back to the grassroots where it belongs? And so this is about democracy in our party. And the membership of this party and its supporters now totals over 600,000 people. 600,000 people. Party members, almost 400,000 of them, union supporters and registered supporters of the party. I hope every single one of those registered supporters that have paid their £3 and registered to vote change their ways and become a full party member as soon as possible so they can take part in the democracy of the party. I hope the same thing applies to the union members, but I also welcome the union involvement in the party. I am not ashamed to say I've been a unionist all my life. I'm not ashamed to say I'm very proud of the link between the Labour Party and the trade unions. The trade unions founded the Labour Party, the socialist organisations joined with them to give us the fundamental basis of the Labour Party. We can be proud of our roots, proud of our past and proud of our values, but above all, understand the problem we are in at the present time. We didn't win the election in May. We clearly lost the election in 2010. It wasn't the pay rates of nurses, doctors, street cleaners, refuse collectors, care workers, or anybody working very hard in our society that crashed the economy in 2008. It was unregulated banks with their directors and chief executives on telephone number salaries, who then apparently were so dispirited in their work they needed telephone number bonuses in order to encourage them to go to work and receive their telephone number salaries. I've always found it very odd the way that very high-paid people in the private sector seem only capable of getting out of bed and going to work in the morning if they've got a big bonus at the end of the year. I've never found the same argument ever going on in a hospital canteen when the nurses are on night shift break, or street cleaners are taking a break to have a coffee or whatever during their work. Somehow or other, it seems there have to be incentives for the very rich and threats for the poorest and the other end of society. Can't we turn it all around? And that banking crisis was very serious, obviously. And the government, and I was in Parliament at the time, did the right thing in bringing the banks into public ownership, did the right thing in giving a very large, effectively soft loan through quantitative easing to those banks in order to keep the economy afloat, did the right thing in raising benefits and pensions initially, because that put money into the economy, because there's a fundamental economic lesson. It's called the economics of everyday life. If you haven't got much money, you're forced to spend it to buy food, to travel, and all the things that we need in everyday life. If you're very rich and you get more money, you salt it away somewhere in a tax haven, put it in a distant savings account, and it ain't any good to anybody else but those very rich people. So there is a thing there about ending inequality. Kind of helps the economy grow, you know what I mean? Fundamental economic lesson. And then the mistake, and I believe it was a very serious mistake, was not to take control of those banks and direct them as to how they behave, and direct them to invest in jobs, in infrastructure, in housing in our society. We basically let them carry on as they were before, and now George Osborne, the Chancellor, is selling those shares off, our shares, at a loss. He is wrong. Those banks should be publicly owned as well as publicly controlled. And so we then asked the question why we lost in 2010. And I believe it was fundamentally this, that we were accepting the idea that the rest of society had to pay for the banking crisis. Therefore, the debt that had been incurred in bailing out the economy had to be paid off in a specific time, and the source of payment was cuts in public expenditure, was job losses of public sector workers, was cuts in local authority expenditure, was depressing wages for everybody and cutting back on a lot of infrastructure investment. I think that is fundamentally the wrong way of looking at it. Austerity has worked. It's worked for the minority, it's worked for the wealthiest, it's certainly damaged the life chances of the poorest. We are now the most unequal society anywhere in Europe as a result of 5 years of austerity. And 5 more years of this Tory government in office, albeit with a small overall majority, will make us an even more unequal society. Look at the budget they've just put through. The budget, selling off £30 billion worth of state assets in 1 year, almost double the largest amount Margaret Thatcher's government ever sold off, making more cuts in local authority expenditure, therefore costing jobs, therefore damaging adult social care, therefore damaging every local service everywhere in the country. It also, together with the welfare bill, attacks young people, takes away the opportunity to go to college for the poorest youngsters, takes away the educational maintenance allowance, now gone, takes away the possibility of advancement for many young people. Also, cruelly, says the 3rd child onward in any family will not get any state support whatsoever. Sorry, our country signed the Universal Declaration on the Rights of the Child, in which all children should be treated equally and supported equally by our community. And sorry, it's simply wrong and immoral what is being done. And we have a welfare reform bill, welfare reform piece of legislation that is disgraceful in the extreme. It introduces an even lower benefit cap. It does nothing to control the high rents that much of the benefits go to pay. It does nothing to increase the low wages that are subsidised by in-work benefits because there are such low wages paid in so many parts of the country. And it continues to take benefits away from those with disability conditions and even those with mental health conditions. It continues with the cruelty of the availability for work tests and all the horrors that go with that, where some people have even taken their own lives out of fear of the situation they've been placed in. And as a society, we've become cruel, we've become ignorant of the needs of many others, and we've frankly passed by on the other side while too many of our fellow citizens are struggling and in a very bad place. So cannot we, as a Labour movement, proudly say, yes, we support a national health service free at the point of use for all as a human right, and also say we want a real social security system that doesn't consign anyone to destitution, does not allow people with many complex conditions, disasters, problems they've had, ex-service people and many others, to end up sleeping and begging on the streets of this country. Surely we can be big enough to say we want to live in a society where that sort of thing simply does not happen. You might say this is electorally impossible to say that kind of thing. I'm told that all the time. I'm not so sure. I think there's a lot of people out there that do feel concerned about the growth of inequality in our society, do feel concerned about the loss of opportunity and talent for many young people, do feel concerned about the levels of poverty and homelessness that exist all over our society, and do want us to do things differently, such as expanding our economy, such as a national investment bank to invest in rail and housing infrastructure, such as a programme rapidly introduced. The only thing that's suffering in this campaign is my voice, by the way, to build and supply sufficient council housing to give permanent, secure accommodation to all those in housing need. These things are actually possible to achieve. And so our proposals are all of those. But it means as a party, we've got to do things rather differently. When the party says it's got to be seen as economically competent and attractive, that can mean lots of things. You can make yourself very attractive to Rupert Murdoch. You can make yourself very attractive to global corporations. You can make yourself very attractive to the super rich around the world. But the problem with doing that is you make yourself attractive at the expense of something else, often called your soul, but also called the needs of the very poorest within our society. And so I think as a party, we've got to reassess where we're going, challenge the austerity agenda being put forward by the Tories and in the past by their partners in crime, the Liberal Democrats, because it's essentially a political agenda about shrinking the state, shrinking public services, promoting privatisation, promoting wealth at the expense of the majority of poorer people, and it's a political agenda which is deeply unpopular in every country where it's been tried. So the big meetings we're having now, yes, they're big all over Britain. England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, they're big wherever we're holding them. The same kind of thing is happening in many parts of Europe, where people have had enough of the austerity agenda and the cruelty with which it's been carried out against the people of Greece, for example. And in the USA, Bernie Sanders' campaign for the Democratic nomination, which he's started, is attracting massive crowds of 20 and 30,000 people in football stadia all across the USA when he's challenging the whole concept of the growth of wealth, obscene levels of wealth amongst the minority, very wealthy in the USA, at the expense of the poorest. There is some kind of global movement going on, and I think it's very, very exciting. And I think it's something the Labour Party should be able to understand and embrace. There are many, many other issues to face about how we do things. I'll just mention two and then I'll stop. The first is how we deal with the natural world and the environment. We've put forward suggestions on that it's no good having tough environmental pollution regulations and emission control regulations in this country, or indeed all across Europe, if at the same time they're not global, at the same time they're not legally binding on every country and every industry. You know the consequences of deregulation and lack of emission controls. Those poor people that died in Tianjin, in a port in China last week, from a chemical industry fire because of the lack of regulation, the lack of effective trade unions to represent those workers. Many perished as a result of it. We in this country have paid the price of that kind of policy in the past. That is how our trade union movement came around. That is how we gained health and safety and welfare at work legislation. That's how we gained a safer society. It's no good if we gain a safer and cleaner society for ourselves if we don't do it everywhere else, because pollution clouds and polluted rivers and seas don't recognise national boundaries. They flow and blow where they're going to go. And so there has to be a global approach to how we protect this planet and our environment. And that is one of the suggestions we put forward in our policy document. And the last point I'd make is on overseas issues. I have spent my life campaigning on peace, justice and human rights issues. And sometimes people choose to believe the worst and say the worst about that. If we want to end conflicts around the world and bring about peace, you have to take risks for peace. You have to talk to people you don't like. You have to talk to people that don't like you. Talking to your friends doesn't bring about peace. Agreements do. Agreements help. Bombing often does not help anyone. That's why I was so opposed to the Iraq War in 2003. And I opposed the Iraq War not because I had any great sympathies for Saddam Hussein. I didn't. I was actually one of a very small minority of MPs who voted against arms sales to Iraq during the 1980s because of the human rights abuses that were going on there. We have to be quite careful and quite thoughtful about how we deal with dictatorships, how we deal with routine human rights abusers. And shouldn't we think a bit more about trade treaties that do encompass human rights values, that do encompass human values, that do encompass elimination of poverty values? And if we believe it is wrong to imprison people without fair trial, it is wrong to execute people in public, it's wrong to imprison children, then it's wrong whichever country is doing it, wherever they happen to be in the world. It's a universal issue. And so I conclude with this two thoughts. The situation in the world today is that there are more people who are displaced as a result of environmental degradation and armed conflict than at any time in recorded history. They are desperate people. They're desperate people dying in the Mediterranean. They're desperate people dying in the South China Sea. They're desperate people all around the world. We cannot solve all those problems, but we can make some kind of contribution to it. The wealthier countries have got to step up to the plate. We've got to develop a world's economy that doesn't force everyone to leave their place because they simply cannot survive there. We've got to think about the global role of our party and things as well. But it doesn't help when you have a Prime Minister and a Foreign Secretary that describe desperate people in a camp in Calais as a swarm and akin to insects. Sorry, they're human beings trying to survive. And I thank and congratulate the BBC for having the courage to show songs of praise from Calais on Sunday. Our party has been through great times. We were founded to bring about social justice. We were founded on the backs of those that stood up against the power, the unaccountable power of those in the 18th and 19th century. We're founded by those people that brought votes for women. We're founded by those people that created the National Health Service, the National Insurance System, brought us the Human Rights Act, the Equalities Act, brought us equal pay at work, and brought us a whole lot of very important principles. But there is no God-given right for political parties to exist. They've got to mean something to their members, to their supporters, and to the wider public. And what's exciting now is the way that more than 500,000 people are now directly associated with the Labour Party in this electoral process. They've joined for a purpose, because they want to live in a society that's coherent, cohesive, and optimistic. They want young people not to leave university with massive debts, but to leave with opportunity and hope. They want education for all, from which we all benefit. An educated society is a good society for everybody. That's the sort of principles that brought our party about. That's the kind of principles that challenge the narrowness, the nastiness, the inequality, the injustice, and the arrogance of this Tory government. Let us be strong. Let us be confident. To oppose and defeat the Welfare Reform Bill, to oppose and defeat the Trade Union Bill, to oppose and defeat this budget in what it's doing, but above all, to grow our party as a movement that's there with everyone, all the time, in their day-to-day struggles, as well as the bigger issues that face this country and the rest of the world. This summer of 2015 is a time of great optimism. Let's keep that optimism together. Let's keep that unity and that spirit together. Let's go forward to try and build that better world that we all know to be needed and possible. Thank you very much.